One of the things I've learned covering electric power is that the most interesting changes often happen quietly, inside projects, companies, and communities experimenting with new ways to run the grid. That's why I started the Energy Changemakers newsletter. Each week, I share reporting and insights about the innovations creating the decentralized grid. If you'd like to follow along, you can subscribe for free at energychangemakers.com. Now let's get to the show. We know the grid is undergoing massive change, which creates massive opportunities for local energy. The Energy Changemakers podcast offers rich conversations with industry leaders to help you and your company capture opportunities to build a decentralized grid. I'm your host, Elisa Wood. Welcome to the Energy Changemakers podcast. Hey everyone, Elisa Wood here. I've been following energy developer Ameresco for decades, and I've noticed something about this Massachusetts company. It has a habit of showing up early to energy trends that later become mainstream. It's helped shape the market for energy efficiency, performance contracting. It was talking about microgrids like long before most of the industry. It saw the rising concern about energy security and worked with the military to develop on-site energy. Now it's making another early bet. Last week, Ameresco announced the formation of a new biofuels company, Neogenyx Fuels, with a $400 million investment from HASI. A few weeks before this happened, I had a chance to talk to Mike Bakas. He's a longtime executive at Ameresco and now CEO of the new company. So what makes Ameresco so bullish on biofuels right now? Here's what Mike told me. Hello, Mike. I am so happy to have you on the show today. I've wanted to have you on the podcast for a while now. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
We've known each other for a while. I've known Ameresco for years. We've been in the business for quite a while, Mike. You're well known. Tell me a little bit about how you got started and how Ameresco got started and what Ameresco is about today. I know that's a lot, but let's start with where you got started.
Well, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I used to work on boats as a kid and would help mechanics out a fair bit. And I really enjoyed working on mechanical systems. And so when I decided to go to college, it made sense. Hey, let's give this mechanical engineering a shot. And that kind of got me ultimately into the energy space. And graduated from college and worked in the mechanical system space, energy space right out the gate. And it was shortly thereafter that I had the opportunity to connect with George Sakalaris, our founder. George had actually tried to hire me as I was graduating out of college, but I chose a different path in the short term. But then ultimately, George convinced me of his vision of what he wanted to do, something special in the energy world. And I joined him. And I worked for him at a previous company that he owned. And then deregulation came, if you remember, back in the late 90s.
Oh, I do.
And, yeah. And we all thought we had to be part of the utility because we all felt that we had to be able to move electrons, BTUs. And so George sold his company to a utility out of Pittsburgh. And within about 24 months, we all realized, no, customers actually wanted an enterprise that was agnostic, that would look at things with open eyes and not have any kind of hidden agendas of moving energy or whatever the case might be. So in 99, George tried to buy the company back. They wouldn't sell it to him. So on January 17th, 2000, he resigned and grabbed myself and another. And on cocktail napkins, George drew out his vision for what would ultimately become Ameresco. And what he really saw was that there's going to be a great need for energy efficiency globally because the demand for energy was increasing, but resources were not. And that there was a lot of interest for customers to have others own the energy assets. And that ultimately was how Ameresco was born. And our business plan back then, and it continues to remain true, is we go in and help customers figure out how to reduce their energy needs so that their consumption levels go down, and then come up with solutions to provide them supply, primarily renewable energy supply. to meet those needs. And it stand the test of time. And what's kind of cool is that what we've seen happen, and you'll appreciate, Lisa, going back to microgrid knowledge, is we've seen continuously also a high need for resiliency and security of supply. So our business continues to evolve to address that as well.
I'm always inspired by the Ameresco story. I think there's a lot of people in this business who are just getting started and they wonder, can it work and can it last? And you're just a great testament to how an entrepreneurial company can really grow and be successful in this space. And you've got a lot of cool projects to your name. People can go online and Google Ameresco, and you'll see they've done lots of interesting stuff, microgrids in the federal sector, performance contracting, energy efficiency, just a lot of really great stuff. So today, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. On this show, we typically talk about the generation sector, but we're going to pivot today and talk about the green fuel sector. And it's very pertinent right now, of course, because of what's going on. We've got a war in Iran. We've got, I guess you could say, a new oil crisis. And so I want to dive into your thinking about this and what Ameresco is doing in terms of fuels these days. So you've been around for a while. You've seen one energy crisis after another. What do you think is different about today's oil crisis? Do you see it as like a structural turning point, like past oil shocks?
The impact of the conflict in the Middle East, I think, highlights how much the U.S. continues to rely on foreign energy sources. And as U.S. refineries often require specific types of heavy crude oil that are imported, even though we export a fair bit of lighter crude oil. The U.S., I think, imports somewhere between 35% of all its petroleum needs that it consumes. So what I think is happening is we have this conflict going on that's causing, obviously, volatility in supply, and our demand for energy is experiencing a rapid surge. If you look over the last decade, say 2010 through 2020, U.S. energy demand, particularly electricity, remained nearly flat. And I'm proud to say we played a little role in that because it, it remained flat because of efficiency.
Right,
So
right.
we've done a tremendous amount of efficiency that helped kind of maintain a flat low profile. But now what's happening, and this is maybe the difference, in the last few years, energy demand has achieved new highs, heavily driven by data centers, the AI development, and industrial electrification. I think electricity demand alone increased by 3% in 2024, which, while you might not think is a lot, it's actually the fifth highest rise this century.
Oh, wow.
So I think that we've got a crossroads where you've got this all of a sudden constraint of fuel and resources and this demand spike. I mean, even if you pulled out the Iran conflict, I think we're going to see this challenge because you've got this huge growth of demand in spot locations that are going to be challenged with capacity constraints and supply constraints. Then you throw in the Iran conflict, and it's a perfect storm.
So we have an oil crisis on top of an energy crisis, like dual crisis is going on here right now.
Yeah, and look, we have just a real insatiable desire for energy, right? Because we love our technology, and so demand's only going up. It's not slowing down anytime soon.
So how is this changing how companies think about fuel and energy security?
You know, I spent most of my career at Ameresco developing the asset projects, and so that's the supply side.
So when you say asset project, what do you mean by that?
The generation projects. So whether it's power
Mhm.
plants or we'll talk a little bit about renewable natural gas and cogeneration and so forth. It's more the generation side. So I had an opportunity on a number of occasions to chat with the CFOs of different companies who we will be selling fuel to. I'll never forget one of our early projects in 2002 was BMW, and their largest plant is in Spartanburg, South Carolina. They produce some crazy number of cars a day, like 5,000 cars a day or something.
Oof.
And I remember the CFO saying to me that energy was a large part of their OpEx. And volatility swings in the energy markets, therefore, had a material impact to their business. And when you think of those businesses that are fueling this increase in energy demand, such as data centers and AI development, security of supply is paramount. If they go down, the product loss is huge. Even BMW, if they lose their plant for a day and can't produce 5,000 new cars, just do the numbers. You're talking a crazy amount of product. AI, the same. They need high nine reliability. So they can't afford any downtime or disruption to their supply. It's the oxygen for their business. So it goes without saying, these businesses are uber focused on fuel and energy security.
Interesting. So here we are today then with this crisis on top of a crisis in terms of energy. And whenever this kind of thing seems to happen, I guess the bright light, if you can say that, is that it opens the door to alternatives. So we're going to talk today about renewable natural gas as one of those alternatives that's emerging and whose time really may have come. Let me just start from the beginning here because I think, not everybody's really familiar with RNG, renewable natural gas. So let's just talk about the basics, like why is it getting so much attention now and where's the demand coming from?
To begin with, just in case folks don't know what it is, renewable natural gas, it's essentially a pipeline quality gas that's fully interchangeable with conventional natural gas, but it's derived from decomposing organic waste. So from landfills, livestock, and wastewater. And while it's sustainable, low carbon alternative produced from anaerobic digestion, which captures methane that would otherwise escape into the atmosphere, it is also a domestically produced baseload energy resource that brings with it a security of supply. And I think that's very important to know because it dovetails great into where we are today, where people or industry needs more local energy and they need baseload energy, not intermittent resources. As far as demand, where the demand for RNG is coming from, I think what I would say it might be helpful to step back in time 26 years ago when Ameresco was founded. Early on, we began developing biogas projects for both power generation and thermal use. And this was primarily driven by the fact that it was, again, a baseload local fuel source that at the time was somewhat competitive with brown energy. And in many cases, since it was a distributed resource, it was very helpful in those systems that had capacity constraints because now you had the generation right where the capacity needs were versus some large central plant further away. As the market evolved and renewable portfolio standards started to pop up state by state in the early 2000s, this local energy resource gained a lot of attention as a fantastic renewable supply option. But again, most of it was electricity and thermal use. So in 2008, Ameresco actually started developing a project, which we took commercial in 2010, that was one of the first projects of its type in the US, where we took biogas from a wastewater treatment plant, which was a byproduct of the plant, and processed it into a drop-in replacement fuel for natural gas, meaning it met the natural gas spec required in the pipeline. We were able to inject it, therefore, into the utility pipeline network and transport it from San Antonio, Texas, to California, where it was used by a municipal and a cogeneration facility, again, as a green baseload fuel to produce sustainable electric and thermal supply. Then, parallel with that, in 2005, President Bush signed into law what we call the Renewable Fuel Standard Program, which was created by Congress under the Energy Policy Act of 2005. And it was later significantly expanded and extended by the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007. While the program was designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase renewable fuel usage by blending it into transportation fuel, President Bush actually looked at it as part of the country's overall goal to become energy independent and secure through the U.S. all these domestically produced fuels. His concept was, hey, it's great, it's renewable, but it helps create independence and security of supply. So then when you flash forward ahead to see how we progressed, this was early on, right? The 2005, 2007. You go to 2023, nearly 80% of all on-road fuel used in natural gas vehicles in the U.S. was RNG, natural gas. crazy stat, right? I mean,
Yeah.
look how well it took off and started to displace fossil fuel. And so think about it. When Ameresco first started doing these projects, it was used primarily as a fuel for power generation, boilers, and other thermal use. And then over time, now has become primarily used to replace natural gas that's in the pipelines.
Wow.
And that's for transportation.
Hmm.
Now, what we're seeing, which is really exciting from our perspective, is we're starting to see that addressable market expand as a feedstock for producing green hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel, marine fuel, and much, much more. And a lot of that is being driven not only locally, but also by a lot of things going on in Europe and other countries that have an appetite for this fuel source.
Let me stop to share something I've noticed after years covering electric power. The real story of how the grid is changing hardly ever shows up in a single headline. It's happening piece by piece in microgrids, solar, virtual power plants, and new market models that reshape how electricity works. That's what I track in the Energy Changemakers newsletter. Each week, I break down the most important developments in distributed energy and explain what they mean for the industry and the world. Recent issues have looked at the rise of data center microgrids, controversies over virtual power plants, and why balcony solar shouldn't be ignored. So, if you enjoy this podcast and want a clear weekly briefing on where the power system is heading, you can subscribe for free at energychangemakers.com. That's energychangemakers.com. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Now, there's also a push right in the global maritime industry, which looks like an opportunity because there's a push for a net fuel standard through the International Maritime Organization. How big a deal is this for the RNG market?
Oh, it's crazy. Honestly, it's a tremendous opportunity, not just for the environment, but it would be a huge win for the US. So let's just talk about a couple of high points. Market expansion. If you look at the current market for RNG, if the IMO program goes forward, so we're going to start using this as a marine fuel, it would increase the size of the RNG market 11-fold.
Oof.
It also dovetails excellent with what this administration is trying to do. It would increase U.S. exports. So LNG exports in 2025 were somewhere around 43.6 billion. It's estimated that's going to double by 2030. And maritime is the next big market for LNG sales. And RNG, which is sourced from a lot of rural areas as well as, the farm belt, has links to the U.S. ags as participants and beneficiaries of the fuel exports. So a huge win on exporting. As you know, the president has a very robust maritime action plan.
Mm-hmm.
Think about this. It's making the U.S. a global fueling hub, which would drive investment in shipbuilding, bunkering, terminal, and barging capacity. And that's, again, estimated somewhere between, I think, 24 and 45 billion. And then think of the farm bill. U.S. agriculture alone could see 400 to 500 billion in new export revenue through 2050. Biofuels essentially would connect the ag industry and rural communities to U.S. energy dominance and maritime dominance agenda. And the last is the job growth. If this takes off, we could see growth of 400 to 700,000 new jobs in the U.S. in those rural and industrial communities.
Interesting. So clearly, it could become a major driver. This maritime decision could lead to a whole lot more use of RNG. But there's competitors, right, to RNG too. How does it stack up against like alternatives like methanol and ammonia?
Well, renewable natural gas produced LNG, or we call bio-LNG, is considered a superior marine fuel solution due to its drop in compatibility with existing LNG infrastructure and engines and lower life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. That's only up to 80% reduction. And most importantly, lower production costs compared to green methanol or ammonia. So it offers immediate, practical decarbonization without requiring new ship designs or massive bunkering infrastructure changes. And we're seeing it, right? The shippers get it. So the large shippers now have already invested in somewhere around 1,400 LNG dual fuel ships.
Dual fuel use RNG and LNG.
Yeah. And then the U.S. LNG supply capacity is expected to double between 2025 and 2030. And then lastly, LNG with bio LNG is expected to be very cost competitive with marine diesel oil and very low sulfur oil over the long term. So I think it definitely has a leg up, and you're seeing that with the ship ordering that's going on.
So tell me a little bit about what the business ecosystem is here. If we're going to see this scale, who's positioned to supply it? What kind of companies are in this space?
In the RNG space, because obviously, if you think about microing and the blending and all that, you've got the big refiners. But on the RNG space, I think right now the companies would scale up primarily a few public companies and subsidiaries of utilities or large energy companies. And I suspect over the next 24 months or so, we'll probably see a consolidation of the smaller developers, and the industry will be left with a few large scale owner operators. You're going to need scale as this market evolves.
And where does Ameresco fit in? What's your role in the RNG ecosystem?
Well, we've been in this space now for a quarter of a century. I just dated myself. I think about it, time goes by pretty fast. We're developers of energy assets, and RNG is one of many technologies we develop. We've been doing it as long, if not longer, than anyone else. But by being manufacturer and technology agnostic, we are able to use the right product to develop the optimal solution. So, whatever that might be for the application, including small modular reactors for some of our data center projects, we will pivot. And I would say, as our footprint continues to expand globally, because I think we've really made a push over the years internationally, our supply of RNG will as well. So, over the long term, I think we see Ameresco providing RNG to customers across the globe as this demand continues to grow.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of your projects. I can think of all kinds of different fuels you've used in your projects that I've been familiar with. You're clearly agnostic in about what works.
That was done on purpose. So, when George started the company, one of a few of his, if you would, his minimum points were, we will not have any hidden agenda. We will not represent a product or a manufacturer. We need to stay independent and agnostic so customers know that we're working for them, and we'll design what we think is the optimal solution for them, which is going to be different from customer to customer.
Very customized approach. What makes a project worth pursuing right now? What do you look for?
We believe the expansion of our addressable market is coming, and it's going to be global. And as I mentioned, we think scale will matter. So we continue to invest in growing our operating portfolio. And size is important. There's a lot of these projects that sound good, but they're small and don't have a material impact. When this thing expands globally, especially with the shipping, these folks are going to need critical mass, and you've got to be able to offer that. So right now, from our perspective, we're out there developing a number of products to build the portfolio up. So as this market evolves, we'll have that critical mass to be able to meet the market needs.
So shipping is one of those industries where you see the need for critical mass in particular.
Absolutely. We're developing a project right now that will be in the top 10 largest projects, I think, in this space.
Ah.
And that one project is just enough fuel to fuel a very large ship. As much as it's great to see a lot of the dairy projects happening, I think you got to develop every last project, but you'd have to aggregate a tremendous amount of those projects to be able to do that.
Mhm.
We pretty much focus on projects that are a larger scale to be able to meet the needs of what we think our customer base will be.
Okay, so you're saying that you need to get scale in the development of RNG in order to meet the needs of shipping or some other large scale customer.
Yeah, because the transaction costs, two things. One, when you can amortize your project costs over many more decatherms, you can offer a lower price for your product, your output, which at the end of the day, price will be important. And look, the big refiners of the world, the Shells, the BPs, they don't want to do 1,000 different transactions. The lower the transactions, the better for them, the lower the transaction costs. So I think in order to supply this kind of market, it's helpful to have a big portfolio of operating assets.
And you mentioned dairy. Is that one of the primary sources?
Oh, dairy is a good source of RNG, but they tend to be smaller projects. And I think those projects will, you're going to have to aggregate a whole host of them to get someone to pay attention to take the supply as this market evolves. But I'm a big fan of them. The reality is that they're great for the Farm Belt. I think you develop every last drop of the RNG as you can. I think they can serve local supply needs as this market continues to evolve. For the ship side, I think you will see a heavy interest in the larger projects that can have less transactions.
And what are they? Where does it come from?
Those will predominantly come from landfill projects, wastewater treatment plant projects, maybe certain ag projects and things like that.
Oh,
So
okay.
those right now, I think you'll see have the larger volume.
Gotcha. Gotcha. This is a whole new realm for me, so I'm very curious. Let's talk about bottlenecks when you're trying to get these projects going. Are there permitting, interconnection, feedstock financing, all the usual things we find in most energy related projects? Are you running into those here too?
Yeah, where do you want me to start? It's all of the above. Look, a lot of times bottlenecks are region specific. I'll give you an example. I mean, due to permitting, interconnection, and labor challenges in California, for example, in most cases, it costs 50 to 60% more to bring a new project into operations than many other states, and the timeline can be double in many cases.
Wow.
Equipment lead time. In some cases, we use some of the same things you might find in these small power plant projects. So, lead time for transformers and things like that, you'll have
Mm.
those challenges. Financing has its challenges, but when you put together a good, solid project, and like us, we have a 25-year track record of performance, there is plenty of money on the sideline looking to invest. But that's another reason why I think you'll see a little bit of a consolidation. I think money's going to want to go to a portfolio of assets with people who have actually performed for a long time versus a lot of the folks that are kind of new to the game and don't have the track record.
So this isn't a fuel that is heavily reliant on any kind of government incentive then?
Well, originally it wasn't. Now you would argue that government is acting as the market maker
Mm.
to get the assets online by having these programs like the Renewable Fuel Standard. I do think as the market expands and goes global, then you'll be able to see governments start to peel back with the need to incentivize.
Mhm.
We were the beneficiaries of the investment tax credit as well as a production tax credit. It was a few things that the administration didn't go after when they tried to deal with the previous administration's tax credits. And
Mm.
primarily, I think, is that many of these projects are located in the red states.
Where farming is, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So clearly there's some constraints on the industry as there are in all energy industries. How big can RNG get in the US? Is supply a limiting factor? Do we have enough farms? Enough landfills?
Yeah, so God bless society because RNG is ultimately a byproduct of society, right? I've seen a lot of studies over the years. On average, most of the reports suggest that if you were to develop all these RNG opportunities, brought them online, they could potentially supply 15 to 20% of our current US natural gas demand.
Hmm.
But you remember, Lisa, you've heard me say this time and time again. At this point in time, at least, there's no magic bullet to deal with our long-term energy needs and sustainability goals. Our overall energy supply strategy will be met with a number of solutions. And one of those solutions could be RNG. It's a local resource produced as a byproduct of society. Whether we use it or not, it's out there. So it makes no sense to send it to a flare and waste it. We should be using every last drop of it along with other energy supply technologies like SMR and the such. So I'm a big believer that at the end of the day, it's going to require a portfolio of different technologies to meet our needs. And RNG can be a piece of it.
You talked a little bit about current policies. Is there anything else that needs to be done for this infrastructure to scale in terms of government? Anything we need to do?
I think we still need some more support from the government in the short term to attract capital until the global markets open up fully over the next few years. When that happens, then I think there will be so much visibility for the investors. We'll see RNG become one of the great export stories while adding hundreds of thousands of new jobs to our economy.
Ameresco's been around for a while. You have been very good at figuring out what's next and what to do and how to get there. I think that's part of the reason why you have such good staying power. tell me what you see 5 years from now. Like, what role does RNG play in the energy mix, particularly if this shipping standard goes forward?
I can't tell you. It's a big secret.
Business plan.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'll keep it a little high level. Anyone that knows me knows I'm extremely passionate about energy, what we do, and in particular, the biogas space. I truly believe in 5 years, you will see US based RNG going global in a big way. And I would say, in addition to current and future transportation uses like the marine side, I believe you'll also see a fair bit of it used by utilities across the world. We're already seeing some foreign utilities set up shop in Houston looking to procure RNG to set up back home. In addition, I think you'll also see it used for industrial purposes as feedstock. If you think about it, 95% of all the hydrogen produced today in the US is through steam methane reforming. And natural gas is the current feedstock to produce that hydrogen. And in the refining industry, hydrogen is essential for removing impurities, mostly sulfur, upgrading heavy crude oil into lighter, high quality products like gasoline and diesel. And RNG is a drop in replacement for that natural gas, requiring no additional capital investment to the process. So there's so many ways for our addressable market to expand and take advantage of this that domestically produced fuel. So the bottom line from our perspective is that in the next 5 years, I think we'll see this fuel will be one of the tools that will provide energy security. It will provide a great export product. Create many jobs across the U.S. So yes, I'm very bullish on its long-term viability.
Great. Cool stuff, Mike. We'll wrap up here on that note. Thank you so much. Always fascinating to talk to you. Really appreciate your insight on RNG today.
Great. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for joining us today on the Energy Changemakers podcast. I hope today's conversation has inspired you to think differently about the role of distributed energy in our society. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and consider leaving us a review. You can help us shape the dialogue around energy. Go to energychangemakers.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and join our community. Together, we can make a real difference in how quickly we can make our grid local, equitable, and clean.